Now, this is arguably the most important video for RTA because we are going to be talking about standard, and standard is the bread and butter of every RTA game. Okay, so let's talk about what is standard. Yeah, now standard literally means what it says. It's trying to tell you a very standard composition of an RPG game that you would play, right? Like there will be a healer, there will be a tank, there will be a DPS, there will be a debuffer, and then there will be like, a sub DPS. That kind of, a party when you're playing an RPG game. That is what it's trying to encompass. Okay? Which is why we call it standard. Because when you're talking about that kind of a draft, you usually cover a lot of your weaknesses. Everyone protects each other. You work as a team. And so that is what standard is all about, and that's what it's trying to comprise. Now, why is standard so important to learn, you would ask? Because when you're playing standard, remember this? Remember this playstyle spectrum? I'll just write it down here. Standard is right in the middle. What does that mean? That means everything originates right from standard. And if you start playing standard and learn how to play it well, you can most 100% pivot to be more aggressive, or you can shift downwards and become more passive. And by passive, I mean tank down. Okay? Everything starts from playing standard. Whether you want to be more aggressive or you want to be more passive. And so, the real question here is, why should you learn standard? Yeah? Every time someone comes to me and asks me for, how to do this draft, how to do that draft, I say, do you know how to play standard? I will always ask them whether they know how to play standard first, because standard gives you the foundation of drafting. This is very important, even in anything you do. If your foundation is rocky, you cannot build anything on it because your foundation is rocky. And standard is that foundation for you when it comes to playing RTA. Okay? Remember, everything starts from standard. Once you understand how to play standard, you can understand where to go on the playstyle spectrum for your own playstyle and see what fits you better. You can't just jump into an aggro team comp without understanding how to play standard, because your drafting mindset and skill will not be there. And therefore you're going to be drafting a whole bunch of, aggro units and just lose because you don't know how to properly pick and draft your units. Right? So, this is why you should learn how to play standard. And in this video, I'm going to actually talk about all the tips and tricks that comprises every single playstyle. Okay? Secondly, standard is where every play style variant originates. Okay, I already talked about this just earlier, but you have to know how to play standard because of this very reason. Every playstyle that is out there in RTA, be it tank, be it aggro, be it cleave, be it CC aggro, anything, or just bruises, all comes from standard. Alright? And the third thing that on why you should learn how to play standard is because It teaches you how to read drafts. This is very important, especially for standard players, because you are trying to fight for domination in the drafting phase. And so if you're trying to do that already, what better way to do it than to learn how to play standard so that you can read what your opponent is trying to do. If you can read what your opponent is trying to attempt, that means you can very easily know how to counter pick him and counter his draft. Correct? Without this, your foundation isn't there. You don't know how to do any of this. You cannot play RTA. And this is why a lot of people are afraid to even go into RTA in the first place, because they don't have that knowledge. And my job here is to help you break down these barriers, gives you enough information so that you can go into RTA more comfortably. Okay, so let's talk about the pros and cons now. Okay, so what are some pros and what are some cons in RTA? In playing standard, I mean. Number one, it is the foundation. Okay, I don't have to talk about this. I've been going on about this already. Second point, you are not required to have specialized gear or specific units. What do I mean by this? You are not required to have specialized gear or specific units. Very simply, if you want to try and play tank and you don't have healers, you cannot play tank. If you want to play aggro and your speed is 150, you are not playing aggro. Yes? With standard, you don't need any of that. You can play based on how you draft. Okay? You are playing this tango with your opponent. You're not trying to, play a certain way or dictate a certain playstyle through your drafting. Okay? And this is very, very, very good because of point number 3. Hard for opponent to read your picks. It is very hard for your opponent to read your picks. And because it's hard for them to read, they have to choose wisely. If you're playing aggro, and I can see you're playing aggro, I just bulk the fuck up and just tank it out and then reverse sweep you. If I see you're playing supremely tanky, I just know the correct DPS to bring into your tank draft already, which I know is going to give you a hard time. I can't give you units right now, so don't ask me what units are specifically for that. The game's not out yet. I'm giving you guys frameworks, okay? Now, what are the cons? What is the con? You need a lot of practice. Why do you need a lot of practice? Because you're not gonna learn how to play standard day 1 of playing standard. You can learn how to play aggro day 1 of playing aggro because it's just here is your flow chart. Go. But if anything deviates from that flow chart, you're screwed. That's it. GG. Right? With standard, there's no such thing. You play every game dynamically, and every draft you play is going to be at least 80% different. And if it's 80% different, that is a lot of variables playing in the draft. And the only way you're going to get that experience is through playing a lot of games. And that's why you need a lot of practice playing standard in order to get good at playing standard. Flip side, if you learn how to play this and you actually go through the cons here and take all the time in the world to learn how to play standard, you can play tank, you can play aggressive, you can play bruiser, you can play CC, you can play everything. Okay, which brings me to the next point. The other con is that you need brains. Why do I mean by that? Because when you play standard, you have to constantly be thinking, if I do A and consequence is B, do I have C to back it up? Always. There is no two things about it. You can't just go, I'll just pick A plus B. They pick, C, which counters A and B, and you go, oh shit, what do I do now? You can't do that. When you're playing standard, you're trying to tangle with your opponent for dominance. Whoever wins that fight already wins the match. Okay? So that is the pros and cons. Now I want to go into some of the tips and tricks to play standard. And when I say play standard, I'm going to be giving you ideas generally for every single playstyle because it works with standard. Okay? Now, remember, I'm going to write up here. Tips and tricks. Universal. When you're playing standard, the most important thing, okay, and this is point number one here, and it's especially important, especially if you are first pick, okay? And this encompasses every single playstyle on the playstyle spectrum that I have mentioned. And if you haven't watched that, I'm going to link it up here so that you can find your playstyle, so you understand what the playstyle spectrum is, okay? Now, the most important thing is this. When you're first pick, you want to use your first pick as a dictator of the tempo of the match. Okay? What do I mean by this? Everyone knows that the first pick is the most important. Doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter in anything, in any game you play. Your first pick is ultra important because it dictates the pace of the game. Alright? And how do you do that? Number one, you can do it in a couple of ways. So your first way is you can use your first pick to steal units that your opponent likes using. Okay. B, you can pick units you personally want to play, but not play against. That is two ways of doing it. You can either just steal your opponent's units so they can't play it, or you can pick units you personally want to play, but you don't want to play against. But at the same time, you also don't want it pre-banned because you want it as an option. And this is especially important if you're first pick, because say for example, you cannot deal with a Marvel, but you don't want to waste your pre-ban on a Marvel. So what do? You have first pick, you ban something else you don't want to deal with, and you pick the Marvel. Okay? That is another way to do it. C. Here's one. Using your first pick to dictate speed of match. And this is commonly used by aggro and cleave players. Okay, we're not talking about cleave here because it's just aggro times 2. It's just more amplified aggro. Okay. Now, why is this super important? Why is this super important? Because if you go into your first pick and you pick a very fast unit, let's say a Lily, what are you telling your opponent? What are you telling your opponent? You're basically saying, I'm going fast, I'm going to go aggressive. Do you have an answer for this? If you go into your first pick and you go slow, then you're telling your opponent, I don't have speed gear. You can try to cleave me, I'm going to tank it out, and then I'm going to reverse sweep. It's basically that. Okay, and aggro is very good at doing that because you can pivot in and out of standard. Okay, don't forget that. D. Okay. Forcing your opponent to play a certain way beneficial to you. And this one is very hard to pull off and takes a lot of practice, but I thought I'd put it in there. What does that mean? Forcing your opponent to play in a certain way that benefits you. Let's say you want to play a certain unit. You want to play a certain unit, you want to play a certain style. But you need your opponent, you need to bait your opponent into picking those units that makes it favorable and logical for you to use these units. So you're going to pick the first unit that's going to force their draft to draft those units, and then you're safe to pick those units that you actually want to play that benefits you. Say for example, you have maybe, a Messiah that is super strong. Oh, change that. Let's say you have a very, very cracked out Selene. For example, we all know that Selene she has an S2 that if she takes a turn, if she takes a turn, she's gonna put up a barrier that reflects damage. So you want them to play AoE. So you draft a unit, for example, that has stealth or void. And your opponent picks AoEs. Now Selene makes sense, correct? So this is how you force your opponent to play into your trap. And that's very, very, very important. Universally, even if you're trying to play tank, you're trying to play aggro, you're trying to play standard, all of this applies. And that's why I say standard is so important. Okay? Now, number 2. Everything from point 2 onwards works for both first pick or second pick. If your first pick, number 1, is especially important to you, but if you're going second pick, then this second point makes sense to you already. Learn to counter pick your opponent. Learning how to counterpick is very, very crucial in RTA. Why do I say that number 2 works very well for going second? Because when you're going second, you are playing the response game. If your opponent picks A, you're picking B and C. If your opponent picks B, you're picking A and C. That kind of thing, right? And learning how to counterpick is super important because of that reason. Once you finish if you're a first pick and you finish your first pick, you are now responding to pick 1, 2 of your opponent. If you're going second, you're responding with pick 1, 2 on your opponent's first pick. Okay? And how do you learn how to do things? You can, counter pick through elements. You can counter pick through, skills. You can counter pick through speed. These are, some examples. What do I mean by elements? Very simple. If your opponent picks red, you're picking blue. Pokemon days. Opponent picks fire, you're picking water. Opponent goes, Charmander, you're going Squirtle. That kind of thing. Skills, what does that mean? If your opponent is going heavy CC, you pick immunity. If your opponent is going heavy buffs, you pick a Dispeller. That's very simple counter drafting ideas. If your opponent goes 100 speed, you just go 110 speed, or you go 200 speed. You're counter picking them that way. Okay? So this is a little bit of understanding how to counter pick your opponent. And then point number 3, which is probably in tune with counter picking, is learning to counter pick and protect your pick. What does that mean? Learning how to counter pick and protect it is not easy. Once you've learned how to counter pick, so say for example, hypothetical, opponent goes Kraken. You know that Kraken is a CC unit. You go Hell Kit for the immunity, the Shroud Barrier. Or you could even go Lingluo for immunity. Okay? Now you have to think, what messes up my Hell Kit or my Lingluo? And then pick that. So for example, if let's say you pick Hell Kit, what counters Hell Kit? Hell Kit is a buffer. He's gonna put up, Shroud Barrier. He's gonna put up that immunity stuff. What's gonna take that away from me? A stripper, correct? What is the most premium stripper right now out there? Heinrich. You don't want to deal with Heinrich? If you're going second pick and you're going first 2 pick, you can go Hell Kit, Heinrich. You could even go Hell Kit, Viper. Example. Because Viper strips as well. Okay? Now, this is very, very important. If you don't protect your counter pick, your opponent is just going to pick the counter pick to your counter pick and you just wasted your slot. Okay? Number 4. Now this one ties in with, the 4th reason over here. Okay? This ties in here. Alright, so this is 4 plus D. Okay? Now, what is number 4? Learn to counter pick the counter pick to your counter pick. Sounds a bit different. Sounds confusing, but let me try to explain this. For example, let's use the earlier example that we just went with. If your opponent is going Kraken here, okay, let's say, all right, you're going Hell Kit to protect yourself, correct? And you know that Hell Kit's biggest weakness is this spell, right? What can you do? You can either pick the Heinrich, right? You can either pick the Hein here to protect yourself, or as we said earlier, you can make them play in a very, disadvantageous way by going like this. You know that if they pick Heinrich, what counters Heinrich? That kind of thing. Okay? So you can pick a unit to counter what they are already trying to, go with. So say, for example, you know that Hein will be here. This slot here can be something that counters this. So it makes them not want to pick this. It just does not feel good. Just does not feel good. That is what you are ultimately trying to do. So that's what I mean by learn to counter pick the counter pick to your counter pick. Okay? So Hellkit goes, Kraken into Hellkit. Hellkit's weak to Dispel. Heinrich is going to put up all of that debuffs. So what can you do? You can double down on, like, you know, can go Hellkit Link. That is also, you know, one option. Or you can go fast and try to, you know, make sure your Hellkit is protected by the Hein by, you know, bringing in, let's say, a Lily, for example, or a, you know, a Suki. That kind of thing, right? What does that do? That means if they pick the Heinrich, as long as you can go first. Number one, this is nullified. Number two, your Hellkit hits a whole lot faster, a whole lot harder. Number three, if you bring Lingluo, she's gonna have all of these buffs that Heinrich will need to strip off you, which chances are he might just miss the immunity or the Shroud Barrier, and then you're fine. Then Heinrich isn't so much of a threat anymore. Yeah, so it makes them feel like this Heinrich is not valuable enough. So they will just forfeit that entire idea and try a different strategy. And then now, what happens is you can take this from them. You see where I'm going with this? I can't give you a lot of units because we don't have enough units to play with right now. But this is an idea that you have to be able to be comfortable doing consistently. Okay? Well, these are the main 4 tips that I wanted to give you because this encompasses every single playstyle. And if you learn how to play standard, you are good in RTA. Alright? But that's it. This concludes the entire series on how to play RTA. I've covered every single playstyle. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you do, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and if you want to watch me live, I will be live on Abstract. Until then, catch you guys in the next one.